panel moderator, but but it says, we can definitely watch the chat for any kind of comments, but also you can feel free to unmic yourself or, speak. So we want to make this more of a discussion. So it's not just us talking, but we do have some talking points. But again, feel free to join in if you'd like to, so into the discussion. But we'll start off with just introducing ourselves a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and organizations we're involved in. But like Devin mentioned, my name's Dawn Behrend. I'm an instruction and outreach librarian at Lenore-Ryan University in Hickory. I'm a second career librarian, so professional organizations have been really important for me to get into the profession and meet people and learn more. For me, my involvement, just briefly, I like to be involved at the regional, state, and national level. So I have involvement with the Appalachian College Association, the North Carolina Library Association, and ACRL. Those are the main organizations that I stay involved with. And then maybe we can go to Morgan.
All right, awesome. Yes, Devin did a great job introducing me, but my name is Morgan Ritchie-Baum. I'm currently the Business and Social Science Librarian at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Started that position in September of 21. Prior to that, I served as the Business and Nonprofit Librarian at Greensboro Public Library, which is a municipal library system in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm also a second career librarian like Dawn. So professional organizations have also been really instrumental in kind of getting my feet wet and propelling me through my journey as a librarian. Been very important to me and also involved very much like Dawn at local, state, and national organizations. So Blink, as Devin mentioned, I also recently joined BRASS as part of their committee for business reference in public libraries. And then I'm very involved in our local entrepreneurial ecosystems here in the Triad.
And my name is LaJuan Pringle. I am a library manager with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library System. I'm currently at our West Boulevard location. This month actually marks my 25th anniversary with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library. So I've been hanging in there for with our field for about 25 years now professionally. I am also involved with association work at the regional, state, and federal level. Currently, right now, I'm serving as chair of the Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday Task Force of the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, which is a part of ALA. I am also the treasurer of the Rainbow Roundtable, which is the LGBTQIA library gathering, a roundtable for folks who are GLBTQIA. I'm also the chair of the Library Advocacy and Legislative Section for NCLA. And at the regional level, I'm currently serving as an at-large board member for the Metrolina Library Association. I also do a little bit of work with a committee called the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Black Heritage Committee, and that we are really, we're doing work in terms of like bringing historical African-American accomplishments to front and center. And that's also some of the work that dovetails a little bit with library work from time to time.
I think that's an important point to talk about. It's not just, library organizations, but things in our immediate communities and how it all kind of relates back to what we're doing and informs our work as librarians. So, so that's kind of what leads into our next point is, how do we choose what organizations we're going to be involved in? Why is it relevant to us and our career path or our interests? Sometimes it's the cost issues, and sometimes it's just more of a, like I mentioned, national, state, regional kind of issue. But just talking with our panel members about, how they chose the organizations that they did to get involved in. So maybe we can kind of start with Morgan and then LaJuan, and I'll kind of just add on to that. So what are you thinking about that, Morgan?
Yeah, so funny enough, I did not want to be a business librarian when I graduated from library school. I didn't even know that was an option. I'll talk, I'm lucky enough to be presenting a little bit later today in this series of presentations. I'll talk a little bit more about my journey to business librarianship. But long story short, when I by some miracle, was hired as a business librarian, my very first kind of panicked thought was, oh my God, I'd like to be a business librarian. What does this even mean? And I was lucky enough to know that Blink, the Business Librarianship in North Carolina as an organization existed. So I immediately reached out to the chair at that time, who was Steve Kramer, who's still very active in that organization and NCLA in general, and was just like, hi, I know you do this. I just got hired to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. And can you please help me? And Blink was just so welcoming to a new business librarian. And I just knew immediately I wanted to be involved, just for my own sake, right? For my own professional development, but also to just create community, right? So we have community at very many different levels as librarians, but for me personally, I knew for my own professional development and my own kind of development in this identity as a business librarian, I needed to find my people. And there was this pre-made group I was lucky enough to be involved with. And then after I'd just kind of gotten my feet wet as a business librarian, kind of to your earlier point, Nan, I knew I needed to get involved into the business community, right? So finding ways to be involved in the business community so that I could better understand what that community needed from me as an information professional, but also so they knew that they could trust me and that I was kind of a member of their group as well. Getting involved in our local ecosystems here was really important. And then finally, at a national level, as an academic librarian now, my involvement in organizations is really part of my promotion and tenure process. So I knew my tenure as chair for Blink was coming to an end, and I wanted to find new ways to stay involved. And so I felt like it was time to be involved at that national level, which is why I've gotten involved with BRASS.
Interesting. Okay, how about you, LaJuan?
Right. Well, my first involvement with association work came really at the behest of my supervisor, Chris Bates, at the time. Chris had been involved with the Metrolina Library Association, and he had encouraged me to consider joining it. He knew that being involved in this organization would expose me to others across the region, and he knew that they would eventually put me to work. And of course, that's exactly what happened. I joined the Metrolina Library Association, and probably I would say not even within a year of being a member of the association, I became the president, vice president elect, vice president, president elect. And at that moment, that's when it starts, and you're learning things about leadership, you're learning things about coordination. One of the things that we really had to work on being a part of the Metrolina Library Association in that role is coordinating the conference that we have every year. And that's something that pretty much is a part of association kind of work. And I was there planning one of the conferences, and that there was a lot of work involved, a lot of pain, a lot of sweat, a lot of tears, but ultimately, when you're done planning something like that, you really have an array of experiences to talk about and to consider as a part of your own journey, part of your own professional journey. And those are some of the things that you really think about when you're doing association work. Um, it was also around this time that the war in Iraq began to take off, and I had really strong opinions about the war. And I found myself looking for groups of librarians that held similar views. And that's when I came across the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, who are the self-described moral compass of ALA. And it was here that I was also immediately put to work as the coordinator of the International Responsibilities Task Force. And not long after this, I became coordinator of CERT, which was at the time the largest roundtable within ALA, and I think it actually still is. And I found myself making all kinds of leadership decisions about like an email list that had just seen this really strong proliferation of like negative emails and comments coming through. We had to come together and pull together a list of guidelines, email guidelines for the email list. And it was within all of these experiences that I began crafting my own experiences that would eventually lead me to apply for like management jobs. And I was able to use a lot of the experiences that I had learned from association work into manager interviews and subsequently, getting a manager job. So.
Mhm. Very interesting. Yeah. And I guess, for me, like I mentioned, second career librarian, I come from the mental health profession originally. And so there was nothing really there other than, maybe being a member of APA or something, but there really wasn't an emphasis on like belonging to committees or any kind of professional development in that way, like in terms of promotion and that kind of thing. So when I became a librarian, I didn't even know that that was part of being a librarian. So my first library dean was the one who worked with me and was like, hey, join these organizations and try to get on a committee. And so she really provided me some, like a blueprint of, how this would play out outside of my regular job duties. And so I kind of took like this scatter shot approach in the beginning where I wanted to join everything all at once. And so I learned a hard lesson. I'm still learning that lesson, is just that, you have to cast a wide net to kind of get your foot in the door. But once you're in with some of these organizations doing committee work or chairing or whatever, then you can kind of start to decide where do you really fit? Like Morgan said, who were her people? And like LaJuan was saying, what are his passions? And so then you can kind of, whittle that down to what are the sections or committees that are most, relevant to you and what you do. And so like I said, I try to keep that involvement at the regional, state, and national levels, but within areas like for me, I'm very active in the education, behavioral science, social science section for ACRL because those are my liaison areas. So that's kind of my home at ACRL. With NCLA, the lesson I learned there is there was a section that I had been involved in as a member, just a member of the section. And I noticed that they had not been active, and I really wanted more programming and more activity. And so I actually reached out to the administrators or the executive board at NCLA to ask if I could be part of that section, and they appointed me to be chair. So I just kind of came in and kind of was able to revive that section, which was a great experience for me, and then to pass that on and continue that work to the next board that came in. And kind of like what LaJuan was saying too, I learned, putting on conferences, budgeting skills, project management. So these are all things that you can kind of leverage when you're talking about if you're applying for a new job or designing your resume to say, it's not just I put on this conference or I chaired this, but what does that involve? There was leadership, there was, the project management, you had X number of dollars that you were budgeting, you had this many people come to your program. So those are all things that can translate well when you're trying to make a job change or get your foot in the door with the library profession. But again, the last thing I'll say is just it was a great experience for me to get involved in these different organizations just as a newcomer to the field. So I got to network with librarians across the country. And I've made some relationships that I've kept for going on 5-6 years now. People I met at my first conference going to ACRL, and they've become friends and mentors, and just seeing what other people do and what am I interested in. So just learning from your colleagues in the field that have been doing this work for a long time. So that was kind of how I picked what I was going to do. Let's see here. So I guess our next point we could talk about would be how has involvement in a professional organization allowed you to make some kind of shift in your career? And that could just be going from one type of library to another, moving up, just whatever it might be for you. So whoever wants to kind of start with that, we can launch into that.
Okay. I'll start. So, as I kind of mentioned earlier, at the time I started thinking about advancement within my organization, I was already serving in leadership roles as the coordinator of CERT, and I had served as the chair of MLA. And of course, I was able to draw directly from those experiences when I began to interview for library leadership roles. And the experiences were enough that I was eventually promoted in my organization from a librarian to a reference services manager at one of our community locations. And from there, I secured additional promotions to the point that of where I sit today as a branch manager. Um, it and really, I just say like the experiences themselves, being able to draw on very particular things like coordinating events, working with various budgets, having to deal with different members of your organization, sometimes like having to deal with conflict resolution, those kinds of things. They all played a major part in my association work. And all of those things were things that I was able to talk about and funnel through during interviews. I think that I applied for 3 jobs while this was all happening, and the third time was a charm. And really, at that point, I didn't really look back. And it's been a joy being in the position that I am, getting a chance to learn more about like the library operations from all aspects. And I'm really having a lot of fun now, as a 25-year-old veteran, watching like lots of new people come into the field and really kind of moving into more of mentor space where I'm really wanting to make sure that we have adequate leaders prepared for librarianship moving forward. So all of that really started with association work. And at the end of the day, MLA and ALA, uh, those were two, being involved with those associations really helped me with help me on the career path that I am on today.
Mhm. I'm glad you mentioned the importance of mentorship as well, because it's about giving back, to the field and encouraging, newcomers that are in the profession and giving them some of your advice and tips there as they advance in their own careers. So, how about you, Morgan? What do you think?
Yeah, so Blink, the business librarianship group, was just totally instrumental in just my career development and growth, from a lot of different angles. First and foremost, mentorship, finding your community, right? And then finding somebody in that community to just kind of help guide you through, and just seeing all the potential options, right? The great thing I think about association work and being involved in different associations is just to see the breadth and depth of what is possible, right, in your profession, especially when you're brand new, you come in as an outsider. For me, this was a second career. I just honestly, I knew I was passionate about information and connecting people to information and community in general, but I had no idea just what was actually possible, right, in this profession. So shout out to Angel Truesdale, who I see is on this presentation, because Angel showed me, for example, that you could make the jump from public librarianship to academic librarianship, which is ultimately the career path I ended up on. And that was not, again, just like my jump into business librarianship, I did not anticipate doing that. I got into librarianship expecting to stay in public libraries and go into management. But the more I delved into what it was to be a reference librarian, a business librarian, I became really passionate about it. And I also discovered, you know what? I don't think management is where I want to go. And ultimately, first of all, somebody telling me that's okay was really important. And I got that from my, both from Blink, from people in Blink, but also from my own library director, and learning how to have those kind of open dialogues and conversations by practicing them with my association colleagues was really important. But then just seeing, if I want to grow who I am and what I can do, look at all these great examples there are in my association, group. And so I decided to make that leap into academic librarianship. And so here I was again, oh my God, like, can I be an academic business librarian? Am I skilled enough to do this? And is it possible for me to even consider doing this? But then again, there was the association to really just kind of show me the way. But also when I realized a lot of the skills that I had developed planning meetings, running meetings, being involved in different kinds of ongoing projects and presentations and so on and so forth. And then just being exposed to the different, again, types of librarians there are out there and how they do the work that they do just really helps me to have that confidence to believe enough in myself that I could actually take this role on. And then it's just kind of increased right from there as I take on more committee work at my university. That's only after I have taken on committee work in my public, or excuse me, in the library field, because it has given me that experience to feel confident enough in my skills and abilities to do this in my job.
Good points. Yeah. And so, you know, for me, I haven't had like a major career shift, but it just kind of being involved in these professional organizations has just reaffirmed to me that librarianship is the career for me. I always felt like I wanted to do that. And, you know, coming from the mental health field, I all I knew about libraries was me as a library patron. I really like being in libraries and I like librarians. But when I went to my first conference for ACRL, I just remember I just had this, like, I'm not a very emotional person, but like I had this really emotional moment at ACRL and I was like, oh my gosh, this is where I belong. You know, I love all these people. And it was just a diverse group of people, all ages, just different, you know, everything. And just, they were also so kind and they were also excited about what they were doing. And I had never been in a situation like that in my career where I just felt like I was in the right place. You know, I'd always done a decent job as a mental health professional, but it didn't feel like the right fit for me. So being in those professional organizations really helped me to understand that, yes, this is the right career path for me. Feeling, and you know, as I've gone along in my career, we all have these bumps in the road where morale goes down a little bit or we feel a little burned out. And when I go to these conferences, like the NCLA conference that's coming up, I'm looking forward to that. I love going to ACRL, ALA. You get re-energized and you remember that, yes, this is, I made a choice to go into this profession. This is why I chose to do this. And there's lots of people here to support me as well. So I think just that, you know, feeling that connection with other people that have a similar passion for a field, you know, is important. I think where this may have helped me if we're looking at career wise is just I was an adjunct faculty member for quite a while. And I think as my organization saw me taking on these leadership roles and doing more and more, then that turns into a full-time position for me. And I've also made rank. So, you know, it's helped me just kind of in my current position, going from adjunct to full-time, going up to the next rank. So it also has some impact there as well. So, and I guess what we could do is, you know, we're 25 minutes in. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but again, if anybody has points they want to make or questions they want to ask, please feel free to do that. We'll have some time at the end. We'll open it up as well. But if there's anything that's on your mind right now that you want to mention, feel free to do that. So, okay. So we'll just kind of continue on unless anybody has anything. But so the next thing we'll talk about is how do you get into some of these professional development or professional organization opportunities? How do you get on a committee? How do you get elected to a position? Oh, and here's actually, before we get into that, I do see one question in the chat. It says, LaJuan, do you need an MLIS to climb the ranks as you did?
The unmute button, I'm sorry. I subsequently did need an MLIS. I when I began doing association work, I already earned my MLIS, was already a librarian. But I think that a lot of the groups that I have chaired have been run by librarians. I actually, you know what, now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I'm not really sure if an MLIS is necessarily required for you to, it's definitely not required for you to do association work. And it definitely is a way that if you don't want to earn an MLIS, it's a way, again, to learn more about like the different aspects of librarianship. And it is a way to gain leadership within librarianship so that if you're looking at different roles within libraries that may not necessarily require an MLIS, but do require some form of leadership, you might be able to apply and get that job behind those association experiences. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that you have to have an MLIS in order to climb that that ladder. Um, and honestly, I think association work can really help folks who aren't interested in earning an MLIS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Then what I just, as you were talking, I did put in the chat what I'm involved in, ACRL, NCLA, just some links there, like you can look and see, like what are some of the committees, what are some of the sections, how do you join? I also put a link to the upcoming conference at NCLA, but that's just a kind of a way for you to kind of go in there and see what are some things I could get involved in if I wanted to do that. Oh, and then we have another question. So it says, Morgan, what was your thought process in realizing that library management was not the path you wanted to take?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of that process really was my association work. I just coming into it, I kind of thought, well, if I'm putting this time and effort into getting my master's in library and information science or studies, well, I have to become a manager, right? Like that's what you have to do, right? And to kind of a point LaJuan was just making, it was really through my experience in associations that I realized, no, that's not necessarily what you have to do. And part of, I think, association work, networking is not a dirty word. I know it's not everybody's like favorite activity. And I definitely I'm so tired as a extroverted introvert. Like I'm so tired after, going through like a process of networking and all of that. But the more I talked to people outside of my little bubble in terms of where I worked and what I do, the more I realized, I'm really interested in research, and I'm really interested, like I've gotten really passionate about mentorship and exploring, what can you do as a business librarian and how can you impact community? And I loved working at the public library and I loved working with my community. And I also saw how much work managing a library is, right? Managing the interpersonal relationships and the outward facing relationships and the talent and the time and the passion you have to have for that. And kudos to library managers, like hands down, right? Like y'all do the Lord's work, okay? But that was just not where I saw my strengths and my passion. And in fact, when I decided to make that move to academic librarianship, my library director, stepped aside and said, I think you would make a great library manager. Can we talk about why you want to make this move? And we sat down and we talked through it. Side note, open lines of communication are so important in any sort of employee dynamic relationship. I also think that's really important in association work as well, communication. But after talking through it, we both just realized that, for me to advance in my career and my career growth, that, moving into academic librarianship was the right thing to do. And being involved in association work still let me have a foot in public librarianship as well. By, Blink serves academic librarians, special librarians, and public librarians. I still have a heart for public librarianship and public service. I try and bring that to my work here at Wake Forest, but I can also take the resources that Wake Forest has provided me in terms of providing support for me to do professional development, et cetera, and put that into Blink as an organization so that I can then provide opportunities to folks like our public librarians to do their career development, bring different programs, have support in what they do. So ultimately, right, it was my thought process was just really examining my strengths, what I knew to be available out there, and then talking with my leadership at the public library about where I wanted to be, and then kind of getting that advice and just making that jump. That was a long about way of answering that question, but I hope it was helpful.
It's very helpful, I think. Yeah, because I think that's a common question is, how do you decide what you want to do or not do, and you don't know until you're in it and doing the work and seeing what other people are doing and whether that's a good fit for you. But a side note for me too is, I work closely with Libby Stone. She's our president at NCLA, and another librarian, Lisa Coates. I used to work at UNCW. Now she's at New Hanover Public Library. But they both told me, leadership doesn't mean you have to be the library dean. It doesn't mean you have to be the, director of a public library. Leadership is just what you're doing in your position. Like LaJuan mentioned, mentoring others, doing things for the profession. So, sometimes I think we feel like we're always supposed to move up or have some other like higher position, but that's not always the case in terms of your personal satisfaction and what's going to be best for you. So that's a good point. But yeah, we can talk a little bit about how do you even get in? Because sometimes, even like with ACRL, people sometimes say, I've tried to get on a committee. I can't get on a committee. I don't know what's going on. So just talking about how did you get into these, more leadership type roles in the professional organizations that you're involved in? So we can kind of open that up and talk about that a little bit.
So I will say I was strong-armed a little bit into
that's usually how it goes.
my leader. I don't want to like just tell you like the light like shine down on me, and I was like, a voice told me like, Morgan, you should do this. It was other folks having a belief in me that really helped me think even that it was a possibility. And I bring that up because like sometimes, we're our own worst critics, right? And sometimes it really just does take somebody believing in you to like think like, actually, like, yeah, maybe I can do this. And that was such a powerful experience because in turn, it's made me realize, now that I'm in this position as chair of Blink, for example, how important that is for when you're just working with your membership, right? So I think part of it is to just say like, yeah, I believe in you and we're here to support you outside of your just kind of professional, like your job, right? Hopefully there's somebody in your workplace that it can provide you that boost that you need, but I think you also need it from just your community, right? And that's one thing is, again, we've said it before, associations provide community, we hope, right? And that was just like one way I could give back, right? By telling people I believe in you. But it did take somebody literally being like, why aren't you putting yourself up for this? You have the skills, you have the abilities, and we think you'd be great at doing this. And then Don, something you said also, what's that saying? Like, be the change you wish you could be.
Something like that. Be the change you want to see. Something like that.
Right. After a while, like if you're the person that's always coming up with like ideas in your like meetings or whatever, like we should really like do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you start to think like, wow, I'm asking, like, I have a lot of ideas and things like I want to see being done. That should kind of be like the trigger in your head, like, well, do it, like make the change, right? And one way you can do that is by being involved in the leadership of these different organizations. So that was kind of the other impetus that made me believe that, maybe I can be in a leadership position. And it doesn't have to be straight to the top. So before I was chair of Blink, I was a director at large, right? And as, just kind of like these steps up, right? Really help give you the confidence and see the impact that you can have.
And what I will add, I love what Don said about like, I guess, finding your group and then like knowing that you belong somewhere. That has been my experience working with associations. I've always felt like I belonged. When I joined Social Responsibilities Roundtable one of the first events that I attended as a member was the Martin Luther King Jr. Sunrise Celebration. And that attending that event really just gave me like a recharge. It's an event where we honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We remember him through his words and through his actions. And like that was one of the very first events that I attended, going to an ALA midwinter. And subsequently, I would actually end up joining that task force, becoming its chair. And now I'm coordinating this event every year at Midwinter and at Live Learn X. But that was a place where I instantly felt like I belonged. I instantly felt like the connection with the group of people that were a part of it. And it was just something that I loved, and it allowed me to follow my passion in ways that I never would have thought I'd be able to do in libraries. Having that association work background also allows you to be pretty visible to like people in your organization, people outside of your organization. So I'll tell you with the legislative work that I'm doing now, that started about like 10 years ago when a supervisor of mine was a part of the library advocacy committee of NCLA at the time, and they couldn't go to DC for whatever reason. So they asked me to go because they knew I had been actively involved in association work. I was really nervous. I had never done any kind of work, and here I am being asked to go to DC to advocate for libraries. Was something that was really, it was exciting, but it also seemed like it was kind of daunting and pretty frightening. And when I got there and I got to DC and I started making the office visits, boy, did I feel like I was at home. And it was just like there was this sense of belonging again, like, oh my gosh, I found like my niche. And a year later, I would end up co-chairing that committee along with Dr. Anthony Chow. And again, it was just like a great experience, and it has kind of led me to where I'm at today. So really, following your passion, let me get to my notes real quick. Following your passion and the work that you do, trying to simultaneously keep up with work that is tied to your actual role within the libraries often helps too, especially when dealing with your organizations at home. Anytime I can take work from the association and bring it back to Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, that's a win-win. So like that's something that I'm often thinking about too. Like, how can I tie these two together? And right now, with a lot of the advocacy work that's going on in terms of like the banned books, I'm really finding a role within Charlotte Mecklenburg Library in terms of like the advocacy work too. And to me, I can't ask for any better situation. I don't really need to advance. I don't really need to become a library administrator to do work that I love doing. I found that niche like right there. And quite frankly, um, I love being in the branches. Like I love working with customers. I have good days with customers. I have bad days with customers. But at the end of the day, that's who I see myself working at libraries for, like our customers, our citizens, our patrons. So the idea of advancing into an administrative role really doesn't appeal to me anymore like it once did. Uh, and a lot of that has been tied back to, finding my niche within the association and being able to incorporate that work into my daily duties already.
It's a great response. And I think like for me, as a newcomer, whereas Morgan and LaJuan were asked to join these things, I had to force myself into it. I was the strong armor, and I'm like, I'm coming into your committee. Take me. So, but you have to look for those opportunities to join these things. So, like, I didn't know at first, like with ACRL and ALA, there's one time a year that they put out a chance to volunteer. So if you miss those deadlines, you can't join those. That you can't put yourself out there. So, like in ACRL, I believe it's February. So you just have to kind of watch the emails that come out or go on that volunteer page. I think I put that in the chat. But at ALA, it's always August. So you have to just kind of make a little note. I always make a note on my calendar to nominate or to volunteer for something. NCLA, it'll come through the listserv. So we have these biennial conferences. So every 2 years, you'll see, you know, around this. So we're about to have our conference, 2023 conference. So people are putting out messages in the listserv that they are looking for a chair, looking for a secretary, looking for a treasurer. So like Morgan said, don't be afraid to nominate yourself. So don't think, oh, they're going to get a bunch of people. A lot of times they struggle to fill those slots, you know, and so so put yourself out there and nominate yourself. And I did that. I nominated myself. You know, it feels weird a little bit to do that, but, you know, be your best advocate there, put yourself out there. And like I mentioned earlier, I noticed a section that was kind of not as active as it once had been. And I just went straight to the top there and said, I'd love to chair this section. And there I was doing it. And that led to me, you know, I think being, you know, vice president of NCLA. So you can definitely, you know, be the person that puts yourself in there. I even, when I was first, you know, trying to get involved with ACRL, I actually found a section and then a committee in that section that I was interested in. And I emailed the chair and I said, can you use another member? And they're like, sure. And then from there, I got to be really involved with that section. I'm now a member at large for that section. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. The worst thing they're going to do is say, no, thank you, we're good, you know, but it's okay to self-nominate yourself too. And then I'm just going to look at the chat real quick here. I don't know if this is the place for this question, but can anyone speak on scholarships that ALA or NCLA has to offer? We'll kind of cycle back to that one because I think Angel made a comment too. Another service opportunity I want to highlight is being on a planning committee for a local, regional, statewide, or national conference. Sometimes that's a great introduction to service work. And LaJuan, you have experience with that. Morgan too, with Blink. And I'd never done anything like that. So, I mean, it was an absolute huge learning curve for me to do that. But I mean, I learned so much, like Angel saying, that's the pinnacle there is to put on a conference or an event.
And what I want to highlight too was that comment that Angel made is if you are on the fence about if association work is going to be a fit for you, because it's not a fit for everybody. And I think that's totally fine. But the great thing about conference work is there's an end point, right? There's a very defined, like there's a goal, there's a light at that end of that tunnel. There's a very defined goal that you're like going towards, right? And you know that there's going to be a point where it ends and you can kind of reflect. So just 2 thumbs up to Angel's comment there.
Mm-hmm. And then about scholarships, does anybody have any information? ALA or NCLA, I know that there's scholarships like to attend conferences. You know, at NCLA, we offer scholarships. The state library is really great in supporting that. They provide a number of slots for that. As far as membership, I'm not quite sure about that. Does anybody have any information? And maybe I don't know if you're talking about as a member or just being able to go to an event, but there's definitely scholarships for attending conferences and whatnot.
And yeah, I'm not like, I know of lots of scholarships for attending conferences, not so sure about scholarships for memberships, but I would highlight, you know, just getting into those conferences and then networking and building those connections. That's ultimately, you know, getting on those listservs, having people like know that, hey, you know, a big barrier for me being more involved is financial, right? Getting a scholarship because my organization, for example, doesn't, you know, fund, you know, Wake Forest does not fund my membership fees to any of these associations, right? And if that, you know, luckily, you know, I'm fortunate enough that that's not a barrier for me, but if that's a barrier for you, like getting that bug in somebody's ear, right? Then as those opportunities do develop, I really think it's through networking and just putting it out there that, you know, you'll then be connected if and when those opportunities become available.
And I will say, like with NCLA, is it tiered? membership. So it is based on your income. So you can say, I'm a student, we have special rates for that. Or you can say, this is my salary range. It's based on your salary range. So you self-report that. We don't go back and ask for pay stubs or anything like that. So you're just going to say, what range you're at. And then it's a lower rate, based on that. So just keep that in mind too. For the national one, much.
Okay. And I'll just quickly say, just to sort of add to some of the conversation that I'm seeing happening in the chat, Angel is absolutely 100% right that association work comes with paying money to be in that association. And as GW says, travel costs are a serious burden for those who are in organizations and have lower pay. All of those things are definitely true. It definitely helps, like if you have an organization that supports belonging to an association. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, for example, will pay for one membership a year. And they won't pay for several. They won't pay for any of the section work or any of that stuff. But like if you take your ALA membership to Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library and say, hey, I want you to pay for this year as a staff member, they will do so. I think that that a lot of speaking to some of the scholarship work, I know ALA has an emerging leaders program. If you are able to be accepted into the emerging leaders program, there's scholarship work around that where they will pay for you to attend a conference, be a part of a presentation and so on. As Don has shared, NCLA also offers scholarships based on section. And I think if you look at very specific areas within all of these associations, some of the different sections may have opportunities to fund like 1 or 2 members or so in terms of like attending a conference or a virtual conference or something. Some of it just really involves like, again, focusing on the areas that you want to focus on as a member and then seeing what kind of benefits they offer as a part of being a member of their association. Some of the associations do offer some really nice benefits, and they will try to do their best to get you at least to 1 or 2 conferences.
I would say too, don't let the travel be a deterrent, because maybe one of the only good things that came out of COVID was that a lot of meetings are in Zoom now, like we're doing right now. You don't have to go to ALA or ACRL to be in a committee or to chair or something. So like right now I'm doing college library section vice chair for ACRL, but I probably won't go to the conference because I don't know that I have the budget to go, but I can Zoom in. And so, you don't always have to go to these events just because you're in a leadership role. You can have these hybrid meetings or all online meetings. So that's what I always checked. If I take this position, does that mean I have to come in person? And then I'll get an answer from the organization. Yes, you do. Or no, most times, no, you don't. It's fine. So don't let that be a barrier, to that. So, and we have about 10 minutes left. We can continue with some of our talking points, but we have a nice discussion going here. So if there's anybody that has anything they want to put in the chat, or if they want to unmic and do that, that's fine too. And otherwise, we can maybe talk about 1 or 2 more quick things. So, one of the things that we could talk about would be, what is, I think we talked about this already a little bit, but what are the benefits of being in a professional organization beyond just, like I said, moving up or having these goals in terms of, I just want to be this director, I want to be this or that. So what are some of the things that you guys feel like you get out of being in a part of a professional organization that have nothing to do with career growth per se?
It's really the network for me. And I just want to like piggyback off of what Morgan said, because like the networking is so important. And honestly, it's not so much a network, but now it's almost like a group of friends that I now have across the country, across the state, across the region. And I know I can call on these folks. And as I'm actually thinking more about retirement and thinking about retirement options, I'm feeling like I'm still going to be tied to association work. It seems like it's a great area for retirees to kind of focus on and maybe do a little bit more than they had in the past. But at the same time, I'm still keeping this network wide open so that, like, say, I do decide that I need to get a job somewhere, I now have this vastly expanded network, national network, so that I might be able to get another job if I really need and want to. But aside from that, it's just the friendships and the people that you are meeting, and learning about like all of the common things that we have uh, as librarians, all of the things that we have in common across organizations, how we differ. It's all fascinating, and it all makes us better people and better for the profession when you know different people, you know about different organizations, and you understand how your organization functions within the larger world of librarianship.
Mhm.
Yeah, to just piggyback off what LaJuan was saying, all the reasons LaJuan just gave, in my mind, like that's my burnout prevention. Burnout is really prevalent in this field. We are a service-based profession. We're working with community members who have good days and bad days. And we tend to be very empathic, I think, as a profession as well. And there's a lot of positives that come with that, but there's a lot of personal negatives, right, that can come with that as well. We're all, it's not uncommon to also hear, we are understaffed and underpaid in this profession as well. And I think being involved in an association, more so than really anything else I've done for my career, is the way that I stay energized, and keep coming back to work, and believing, right, that I can do things that I didn't think I was capable of doing. And I think that's a benefit if you choose to be in leadership, or if you don't choose to be in leadership and you just come to the meetings or whatever. I think that's all valuable, and I think it's valuable professionally. And then I think it's what can re-energize you. And I do want to put out there, I think one thing that stops people from wanting to be more involved in associations and professional organizations is because they are afraid they are going to be stretched and pulled and taken 20 different directions, and that's just going to be too much for them. And boundaries are important. One thing that has been great, personally, being involved in association, is I've learned my boundaries, right? And I know when to say no. My communication skills have gotten so much better because I have to have those tough conversations, saying like, hey, you know what, I need help with this. And if this isn't a priority for us, that is totally fine, right? If nobody wants to be involved in this or do this one thing or whatever it may be, then we'll just put that on the side and we'll focus on what we can do. So I think, don't let this fear of it's too much be a barrier. Be honest with yourself, right? And what your commitments are 100%, and make sure you're communicating those, what your boundaries are and your commitments are. But it is so rewarding. I just can't emphasize that enough. And it really is what helps push me along in this profession.
Mhm. Those are all great points. Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, just, same for me with the burnout. I thought, coming from the mental health profession, I was like, that made sense to me that I got burned out on that. And I thought, this great new shiny career, I'll never get burned out on this. And, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is a little stressful too. So, but, when you get those negative moments, like, I don't want to do this, and then you go to a conference and you talk to people, or you're part of a section or a committee, and you're like, oh, I really like doing this actually. So, you kind of forget, like, yeah, I wanted to do this. So it's re-energizing. And so definitely a type of self-care going on there, I would say, as part of these organizations. So, but I think we're kind of running towards the end of our time here. So I don't know, Devin, if you want to start wrapping it up, or if there's any other questions or anything, we're happy to take those.
Yeah, this was such a good conversation. It was really nice to just sit back and be like, oh my God, you are chock full of so much advice and the strategies. And I really liked, Dawn, how you took advantage of an opportunity there. I think that's really useful, because I think in libraries, we sometimes feel like cautious about stepping into those sorts of roles. And I actually think that, like, we shouldn't be. It's welcome. And I really commend you for that. So we are wrapping up. We will have our next session at 11:15 with Daisy Shute from Hickory Public Library. So folks take a break, grab another cup of coffee, and we'll be back in a little bit.
All right, take care.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you so much.